Okay, so welcome. This next talk is on kind of a continuation of the discussion of artificial intelligence. But now we're going to change the lens and we're going to shift gears and look at how that gets used in research. And I'll give a little bit of a backdrop of this panel. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask some questions of our panelists, both Dwayne here beside me and our virtual panelists, which is Sydney and Akos. And I'll have them introduce each other in just a moment. So I run a product research and design agency here in San Diego. And as everybody that works in industry had to do over the last 2 years is we had to figure out, well, what in the world's going to happen when AI comes onto the scene? Do I still have a job? How many of you felt acutely that pain, right? I know I sure did. And so I understood that strategically we had to develop a position on AI. And so I started benchmarking a series of different software platforms that claim that they use AI to accelerate research, because we all know that research is great, but it takes a long time to do it really well. And so AI had this, promise on the horizon, right? Oh, we can do research faster. We can do your interviews for you. We can give you your users. Two of the three things scare me. But the first one I was really excited about, which is how can we use AI to actually accelerate and improve the way that we do research and that we serve our clients. And so that began a very long journey for me personally. And through that journey, I found that there were a lot of really important topics that most people just don't know about. And so that was why I decided to organize this panel and bring together some great people that know a lot about this subject. And so I'm going to hand the floor now to those people just to give a quick introduction to themselves, and then we'll kick into things. Dwayne, since you're next to me, you get to go first.
Hey everybody, my name is Dwayne King. I spent about 20 years building a consultancy around UX research strategies, worked with primarily enterprise clients, Nike, Cisco, Intel, Healthcare Corporation America. And then when I left there, I spent the last 10 years in corporate America building UX teams and Salesforce, ServiceNow, and Iron Mountain. Then about a year and a half ago, heard the call of AI and started thinking about what this all means, and left my corporate job to start a startup that's building a platform to help accelerate research, very much in the vein of it's not going to do the research for you, it's not going to do the analysis for you, it's an aid to help speed it up. And so that was kind of our central thesis, is like, how do we help? We kept hearing again and again from researchers and stakeholders alike, like, love research, it just takes too long. I'm like, okay, well, part of that is just inherent in the need to go talk to customers and understand them better, but there are some things that take a little bit of time that we felt like we could start to make it move more quickly. And so we're building a repository that can help disseminate those results as well more thoroughly to your stakeholders.
Akos, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi everyone. Thanks, Bryan, for the invitation. And it's a pleasure to be here in this esteemed panel. My name is Akos Kiss-Dozsai. The funny name comes from Hungary. That's where I'm from, and that's where I grew up. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Airtime, which turns user research calls into product insights using AI. And we also go a step further and help to identify patterns, feedback patterns, also in large volumes of research calls. In terms of my background, it's maybe a bit unorthodox. I come from financial mathematics from back in the days, worked 5 years in strategy consulting, where I got exposed to market research a lot. And between 2014 and 2020, I built a number of products and investment platforms in Germany and in Europe. So this is what sort of channeled me towards user research and interviews in particular. I did, I think, over 1,000 by now.
All right, Sydney.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm Dr. Sydney Yeager. I lead the Workplace Experience Insights team at Walmart as part of the corporate real estate team, where we are, people-led, data-driven team that focus on trying to understand people and places, and particularly on Walmart's corporate campuses and spaces. my background really started in traditional anthropology, so very much, boots on the ground. But while I was doing my PhD, I transitioned into focusing on more digital anthropology. And since completing my PhD, I've worked at 2 tech startups, one in the medtech space and one in fintech before joining Walmart. And so I've conducted a lot of very traditional ethnographic interviewing, as well as remote interviews and probably more surveys than that I want to think about. But yeah, so that's my background, and just hoping to share how we're thinking through it, leveraging AI today.
Great. Well, thank you for introducing yourselves, everyone on the panel, and I'm really honored to have you here with me today. So what I have is the classic non-AI version of asking questions. I wrote down a series of questions on some cards here. Now, these questions are really carefully thought out, but I want to point out the fact that these are just the beginning of a much longer conversation. So we're here for just, a little under an hour today, and we're going to touch upon some of the key issues that are involved with AI and research. But I also want to take a moment to invite you to the future of these conversations. All of us have talked about this before, and we've realized we're probably going to raise more things than we answer today. So we're going to end this conversation by asking you what else you want to hear about. And then we're going to put together kind of a webinar series where we dig into those issues in great detail. So feel free to get in touch with me afterwards, and I will let you know how you can tune into those conversations if you're interested. So with that, I'm going to ask the first of these questions. And it's a 2-part question, okay? One is, what can AI do for research? And the other half of that coin is, what are its limitations? So let's rotate the other way this time. Sydney, why don't you go first? And I think you've got an interesting story to share.
Yeah, I do. So first I'll say, one of the things that I've been very excited to see AI do is transcription very well, right? So transcription is one of the most painful parts of the way anthropologists traditionally went through and analyzed their interviews. So that, to me, was a huge lift. And I think that's really what I would like to see the gold standard, to lift those pieces that are the most painful and time intensive task. In terms of things like sentiment analysis, I've seen it done with varying degrees of accuracy. Different pieces we've tested. I heard one data scientist brag about their sentiment analysis being a little over 50% accurate. And I was like, okay, no, that's not where we're trying to get. But the tool we use today, I would say, is about 80% accurate, and then we have to manually go back and check it. But I'm still seeing limitations around things like thematic analysis, and so that's really where my example comes in. So one of the things my team, one of the challenges we faced this year was the fact that, we're being asked to send out a lot of surveys, and as you imagine, surveys to Walmart associates, Walmart being one of the, being the largest employer in the world, private employer in the world, right? We're going to get a lot of responses. And so even when we're narrowly focusing that on corporate associates, we regularly collect over 1,000 responses. And those sometimes include, open-ended questions. So back in February, our team had the first challenge was this. We had a survey with 2 very open-ended questions, and over 1,000 people responded. And it's like, okay, how do we start, getting our heads around this? Leaders love the high response rate, but realistically, over 1,000 responses. One of the psychologists on our team said, that's a PhD dissertation worth of data. What are we going to do with this? How are we going to do this? And then, management comes back, we need this in under a month, right? So how do we get around it? So what we did, initially we said, okay, we're going to get a representative sample of our sample. Did a randomly selected 50 of the responses to do that more traditional coding, where we had a code book, we used Excel to actually track it all, which codes apply to each response. That work with just those 50 took 2 days, 2 very intensive days. And we're like, we can't do this for the full 1,000. So we started testing out different tools. And so we tested out both our internal language model AI for thematic analysis, as well as some of the approved external ones, right? But right away we started running into trouble. The first tool we actually tried couldn't analyze more than 50 responses at a time without crashing, right? Another tool we had wouldn't let us upload the file. It only wanted to copy, paste, and he ran out of space, right? And then the third tool we tried, it would give us themes, but it couldn't tell us where it got those themes. It couldn't, show its sources or tell us how many people actually, how many responses did that go to, right? So we couldn't quantify it. So, it's like, okay, what do we do, right? So we actually decided, okay, how can we also leverage, statistical analysis using things like R and Python to actually code the data and be able to understand a little bit more about what we could quantify. But that had limitations too, right? We could get word count quantification, we could get 2 and 3 word pairs, right? We could get some sentiment analysis on that, but it was still not really where we needed it. And so what we ended up doing is, taking those themes that we identified in the first 50, going back and looking at, okay, for that theme, what are all the keywords that could be related to the theme of safety, right? Now pull all those into one data set and manually review. Still is very time intensive. Luckily, while we were doing this work, our internal tool actually got an update that allowed us to put more data in at a time, but still that internal tool was limiting 400 responses, so it couldn't get the full 1,000 data set. But through this very and I'm sharing this as like, this is a very complicated process just to get through one data set, right? Through all of that, we get all the way through it, and once we finally are able to upload, the 300 3 times to get the full set, right? We find out it only found 7 of the 12 themes we'd already identified. No new novel data, right? And then it's like, okay, was it worth it, right? So this was, it was very much a learning curve. This was our first time trying to do that. And we had over, we had 2,000 qualitative data points, so we were able to do it in 4 weeks. But it was very time intensive, and I think in that process we learned a lot of which language model tools could do part of what we wanted. Where do we pull in machine learning, right? And how do we kind of make sense of it? But it's very much, and from there we've developed our process we do today, but we're still leveraging 5 tools, and I think that kind of speaks to where we're butting against the limitations each tool has. Yeah.
All right, thank you for that. I think that's a great thing for our 2 research software founders here to build off of. So Akos, do you want to speak to that? What does AI do well for research, and what are its limitations?
Yeah, and I'd like to start by building on what Sydney shared about transcripts, because coming from Central Eastern Europe, I think in English we can be fairly confident that you get high quality transcripts with a lot of tools. But what I very often come across, and this is the #1 pain point for migrant researchers in Central Eastern Europe, that once you conduct research in Polish, Czech, Slovenian, so some not major languages of the world, you bump into like a steep decline in the quality of transcripts and also speaker detection. So also in this area, as we've been building Airtime, we see an immense improvement in the last 1-2 years. So I just want to point this out, that even if I say something is maybe AI cannot do well today, the pace of progress is so fast that if the same group, if we were to sit together a year from now, probably the bullet points that we'll list would be completely different. So transcripts. What it does well also, and I think I'm stating the obvious here, but I like to hammer on this point, it's extremely fast. It's extremely fast. If you take 10 user interviews, you do a concept test, and you want to understand your key insights, right? Now, normally it would take you a few days to analyze that manually. With AI, you can get it down to 20 seconds. It's not going to replace a researcher, and that's not the point I want to. It's not going to also identify all the insights that there are out there. But I think my experience is similar to Sydney, like around 80% confidence level. So if there are 10 valuable insights in a study, a good and well-trained AI will find about 8 from that, and just taking that to sink in, like 20, 30 seconds. It's insane productivity increase. It's almost like when translators back in the days got DeepL or Google Translate, and all of a sudden they could increase their productivity. So this is there are a few other things that it does well, in my opinion. I think it's also good to use AI as to check for blind spots for all of us. I think with even researchers with vast knowledge and decades of experience, we're just bound to miss a few things. And having a second pair of eyes going over that, and even if the AI just identifies one insight, well, if it's 11 insights instead of 10, that's an important increase, and that's very important to not leave that behind. Couple of topics where I think AI doesn't do well, and I'm not sure it will do well in the future, or how well on this. It analyzes text, right? So when we're interpreting insights from user interviews, and sorry, I'm going to be very focused on user interviews because this and focus group discussions, because this is the focus of my product and this is where I have the most experience. All the clues from tone of voice, a shudder, a wince, something nonverbal. It's something that a person can and a researcher can add to the interpretation, and it can completely have the opposite meaning than the written words or the text. So this is something where the human mind is by no way challenged at the current stage of AI's capabilities. Where AI doesn't do well, I give you another point. It's biased. We're biased as well. I give you a bias. It's a very strange bias. First is one of the language models that we use, and we were running analyses through that, and we realized that the insights that we get cluster around the beginning and the end of the calls and the recordings. And it turned out that the model had an inherent bias, assuming that the most valuable parts of a conversation occur in the very beginning and in the very end. And it was missing a lot in the middle. So I think there's probably, as you use, and I'm sure Sydney could share her stories on this as she was running those 400 and potentially in the future Beagle samples through their models. It's very important to be aware of these kind of biases that the language models have. Last point, and then I'll pass on to Dwayne. It's non-deterministic. And what I mean by that is that if you take 10 calls and you analyze them, you say, okay, hey, language model, find patterns for me. It will find you 10. You run it again. It will find similar ones, maybe the same, maybe some new ones, but you're not going to get the same results. So every time it's going to be something different, and it leaves you with a bit of uncertainty. I think at the end of the day, of where your insights are, and even if you get 10 insights from an AI model, how many would you find if you ran the same pattern analysis 100 times?
Yeah, so totally agree with everything they said. So rather than reiterating that, I'll keep building on it. And also, I'm gonna mix AI and vectorized graph databases because we're building on that, and they're kind of a powerful combo. So when we talk about, when thinking about what does it not do well, one of the things it's never going to do well is it doesn't know the politics of your organization. It doesn't know how the mental model, doesn't know how you communicate. It's it's just looking at text and presenting a result. And that's really where I think researchers are safe. If you understand your organization and how it operates, AI is never going to be able to replace that. I think also you got to keep in mind AI is always backwards looking. It's trained on historic data. It has to be. They don't have any way to train it on predictive models now. And so when you're thinking about what can a researcher offer that AI can't, is thinking about extrapolating into what could be versus what is. I think also, and then I think what does work well with AI, one, it's really fast, they mentioned before, and I found it works about as good as a junior researcher in terms of its ability to detect nuance, which means not great. It's good at finding some of that low-hanging fruit for you and knocking that down and getting it out of the way pretty quick, but it still requires a human, because researchers are the queens and kings of nuance. You can really take how two people said something and really pull it apart and be like, oh, but they said and these guys said but, and you can start to really start to break it down, where I've never seen AI be that nuanced. But what is really powerful is, once you have that human curation of inside of graph database and a knowledge graph, now you can start to bring in graph theory on top of your AI as well. And you can start to look at, as we mentioned before, where are holes in your knowledge that you can start to look and be like, well, we see this other information coming in that nobody's paying attention to because a human's already gone through and shown, like, this is our mental model, this is how we're thinking about things. You can kind of shown your signs of your implicit bias, where you can start to use AI knowing that it is bias as well, but you can start to like triangulate on that and start to see, where are we missing things that we should be paying attention to, and where are we really emphasizing parts that are good. And so I think there's just like, if you use AI for that kind of non-nuanced, low-hanging fruit stuff, it can really speed things up a lot. But as soon as you start getting into the really tricky stuff, it's still the human's world for sure.
I'm going to answer this question myself as well. So when I started this experiment doing benchmark comparisons against AI software tools, we had these things called token limits. Does anybody know what those are? Right. So if you had a half-hour conversation with someone and you tried to put the text into ChatGPT or one of these other tools, it simply couldn't process that much information. Right. So that was a real hard stop in early AI in terms of what it could do. And that's one of the reasons why the first AI research products that we saw come out were focused on surveys, because surveys were much smaller data sets and they were scoped around a particular set of questions usually. Like if you think about customer feedback, for example, when I worked at ServiceNow, I learned that it basically fell into one of 5 buckets. It was either a complaint, a compliment, a suggestion, a request, or something random, right? So back then I was using an internal database and I created my own key coding, and I would go through all the customer feedback and manually code it every single morning and spend about an hour just saying, this is what we saw coming through and this is what bucket it falls into. And then it was my job every month to pull that information together, figure out what the themes were, and present it to all the product managers so that they knew what the customers felt about what they were owning. That job's now gone, because AI can very easily do everything I just said. It's working with small known categories. And again, low-hanging fruit, it's going to find most of the trends for you very quickly. That's one great thing it does. Another thing it's great for, desk research, which in the research world we call secondary research, right? Which is, hey, I want to do a competitive analysis and I want to understand where this product sits in the market. Guess what? I can find that out in seconds now, right? Now, I may still have to do some digging, but with AI as my companion, I can find information so much faster. Or if I'm working, like, because we're an agency, so we work with all kinds of different products. And let's say I work in a new sector, I can say, okay, tell me everything I need to know about UX research on, this product. And AI will be like, well, here's a gazillion sources, but here's the top 10. Read those. And guess what? Great, you just saved me a bunch of time. So these are things where it does a fantastic job. Where I found that it really struggled, and it still struggles, but it's getting better, is what I consider true qualitative analysis, right? Theme recognition, when you're dealing with interviews where you might have a script, but how many product managers are in here? A few. Have you ever had a conversation where a customer, we asked one question and they answered something completely different? Right? That's every product manager everywhere, right? And we go in and we want to understand people's experiences, but you got to realize when you're a good interview that it's a winding path and you need to let it go in the direction it will go. If you have a customer willing to talk to you, listen. Don't just force them to answer the questions that you have. And that's, different subject matter, limitation of surveys, right? So a good interviewer will kind of follow the pathway and then redirect people back. But when you look at that data set afterwards, you're like, oh my God, this does not fit into nice, neat categories, right? I have 45 minutes of rambling. What do I do with this, right? And the default answer is forget the interview. I'm just going to take some Google Notes and I'm going to share that at my team meeting. But that's not good research, right? You want to be capturing things. You want to be able to synthesize across conversations. And when you try to plug those conversations into AI, AI has problems. Now, I did say it's getting better. In the sense that we can use some of these tools and platforms now where we can tell it what our research design is. Now, most product managers don't have that either, right? So you can just start with, hey, what am I asking people and what am I trying to learn, right? And if you feed those pieces of information into the tool knows to look for that, right? And these things are very good language model interpreters. So they're really great at finding that information for you, but you have to build a relationship with the AI, right? You have to learn how to talk to it. So again, getting back to this metaphor of a junior team member, it's kind of like that, right? It'll come in and it'll do a decent job of coding, but you still have to go back and you have to audit it, which is one of the weaknesses. In all of our benchmark tests in our agency, we're still faster than AI. Do we do 20 seconds? No. No, it takes us days. But can you trust the AI's themes and insights that it gives you? And the answer is kinda. Right? Like I found that maybe 70 to 80% of the things that the AIs find when they're doing pre-coding and insight analysis is a good start, but they also miss a lot. So because of that, I still go back and I manually read through the transcripts and I audit what the AI finds. And at the moment, it still takes longer for me to do that than if I had just manually coded it in the beginning for myself. That's going to change though in the next 3 months, 6 months, at the very latest, right? And the gentlemen that are here with their companies are proving it, right? And we're going to talk about that shortly. So I have a lot of confidence that the models are going to get better, but to use them, you have to have a level of maturity to understand them and be able to learn to work with them. And that's a new skill set for all of us, right? And we'll talk shortly, but I think one of the real things that it can't do is it's not a mentor. It's not a supervisor. It doesn't understand context. Okay? It doesn't understand sometimes when people say the same thing different ways that they mean the same thing, right? It doesn't know what is beyond your research questions, the business objectives you're trying to meet. And there's really no way to teach it that yet. I think you're working on that, right? So I think that's one of the big reasons why I wanted to have this panel is because what I'm truly afraid of, and this leads right into the next question, is the convenience factor, which I think was brought up in the AI design panel. How many people know or are a researcher that lost their job to AI recently? I don't actually know anybody to answer that myself, but I've seen so many paranoid conversations online about it. Okay, so it makes you wonder, is this real or is this just fear? And it's probably a bit of a mix. To me, I think people like myself are fine because we're developing a mature relationship with it. We know how to supervise it. We know how to consult organizations how to use it properly. And any professional, needs to master their craft. And this is another tool in our craft that you have to master if you want to stay in the game. So I don't think it's that researchers are going to lose their jobs, but the researchers that do get jobs are going to be the ones that know how to leverage AI and the ones that don't are not. And so that's just a fact, right? And I think we need to develop that relationship. But my fear is that what happens to the junior researcher jobs that AI is replacing? How do you become a senior researcher? How do you become a research director if you never have to go up the ladder and you have to sit there and conduct interviews, do surveys, and code interviews until your eyes bleed, right? Back in the day, to use Sydney's reference of anthropologists, I'm a cultural anthropologist as well, that's actually how we met. I remember my transcription pedal, and I would sit there with an audio tape from my fieldwork and go, and type, rewind. It would take 4 hours for every hour of video or audio to transcribe. And then when we did thematic analysis, you know what it looked like? I would print out all those pieces of paper and I would grab the scissors, right? And we would cut things out and we would use markers to color them and we would pin them into the walls and it looked like an insane asylum. Because when you got done with it, it was a whole wall and it was just nothing but pins of pieces of paper. And people would come into my office and be like, this guy's the crazy professor. And I'm like, no, don't you see the patterns? And they go, no. And I'm like, it's right here and here and here and here. And they go home and get some sleep. But I did write a couple books based upon that. So it does work. AI, you don't have to do any of that anymore, right? Thank goodness for transcription. Thank goodness for pattern recognition. So while I have my reservations, I think that the future is bright for this tool, but it's one that requires a particular maturity of understanding and a maturity of application. And that is one of the questions we're going to address, but before we get into how you do a mature implementation of AI, I want to ask the rest of the panel here, what are you scared of? What should everybody in this audience be scared of? Like, what are the things that we need to watch out for? Dwayne, we're going to go your way.
Interesting aside to this, and I think it was 2015, it was probably like the burgeoning of Rutabaga, the company we're building now. We were creating an app called Paper Strips where we were going to put a QR code on the paper strips with the pieces of transcripts and you could reconstruct it easier. Anyway.
I still have nightmares.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, you brought up my biggest fear, actually. Like, whenever people talk about ethics and AI, the one I bring up is we can't be the only industry that is making this claim of we're creating junior researchers. I mean, I'm sure there's junior analysts, junior, you name it. 10 years from now, like who's going to be the seniors if there's no juniors coming up? And something I think a lot about is like, how do we, let's assume we are successful at replacing junior researchers entirely. Like, I think it's incumbent on us to start to figure out, like, well, then what kind of training programs can we put into place that bring people in and build them up? And it's something that keeps me up at night a little bit, to be honest with you. It's something I think about a lot. So that's my biggest fear.
Okay, let's pass it on. Sydney? Sydney?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I think a tie into that is really my concern around leadership's willingness to think we could replace a researcher with an AI. I think, to me, is potentially connected to a misunderstanding of the AI's output, right? Like, what does it mean? What's its significance? We still need that extra layer of analysis to really understand it. The other piece, though, I think people who don't actually fully understand AI, they're not AI savvy, or they've not done a lot of research into it, but might be a researcher or a data analyst, misunderstanding the limitations and risks. So they get a response from an AI and they think that's the final step, right? They're like, okay, I found these word pairs, I'm done, right? I found this pattern, I'm done. And so misunderstanding how much trust they can put into the AI outputs, so that's a piece of it that I'm worried about too. But really this, understanding that we do still need that manual review for accuracy, and understanding the value of researchers to really take it from, okay, this is what the analysis says, but what does that actually mean? Synthesizing it into, insights that are actually actionable. And so far, I've not seen AI take that step. But yeah, I do worry that people are expecting it to be able to. And I agree. I think this concern around how do you train junior researchers can be very real, because as you're thinking through, okay, do we need to hire another junior researcher, or can that capacity now be taken on by the AI? Those are very real conversations that are going to be taking place in the future. So yeah, I think it's a totally valid concern.
Akos?
Yeah, thanks. I'd like to build on a couple of points here. One is this sort of junior researchers. I think there's also the aspect of how to motivate people to actually embark on this journey and become a junior researcher. And the way I confronted this dilemma was a couple of weeks ago. I was out on a trip with friends. We all have young kids, like between 2 and 5. And one of my friends, he asked me, like, Akos, what are you going to tell your daughter when she goes to school? And she says, like, Dad, why should I learn anything when I can ask ChatGPT and I will get all the answers? How are you going to argue that it's worth putting in 12 plus years in elementary school, in high school, and then university or whatever path she takes to learn? And I think it's a very fundamental question of our society that goes beyond the user research realm and domain. The second point I wanted to mention is related to how I think people attain knowledge. How do we attain knowledge? And Bryan, when you mentioned that you spent 4 hours writing that transcript, I'm all for productivity. I'm building a tool which gives productivity for researchers. So don't get me wrong. I'm for productivity. At the same time, I'm hoping for a world where we don't forget that gaining productivity doesn't mean that we need to spend less time with our customers. Because if the danger that I see is that we say, okay, it can do so many things for us, so we get to deal with other stuff in our companies, and we get further away from our customers. And I want to leave an example for you. I'm reading *Sapiens* now from Harari, which is about an overview of human history. And every day I get to read about 10 or 20 pages. The next day I get up And typically in the morning coffee, I tell my wife one of the stories that I read. And I tell her, like, did you know when Cortez came to Mexico in the early 16th century, this is X, Y, Z, this is what happened. And I sort of realized that in this process of spending time with the books, spending time with people, my wife and friends, discussing what I learned there, hearing their arguments and building up on that, I can build a much robust knowledge and long-term memory of all the things that you learned. Now, in contrast, and do this A/B test, you can go on also there are solutions out there which give you a short summary of books. I don't want to name any companies here, but I just checked out very recently, and in 28 minutes, you can also get a summary and key highlights of 'Sapiens. And I know it's a leading question here, but I just leave it hanging in the room. Which of the two processes will leave you with knowledge? And I think this is my point: not to lose focus of the customers and not to spend less time with them.
That's great. I love that. I thought one other thing that terrifies me is that there are companies out there that are unironically advertising that you don't need researchers. You can send AI bots to talk to your customers, and you can do 1,000 research studies in a day. Even scarier, there are companies unironically saying, have your researchers talk to our AI bots. We've got AI bots. We've got these customers, AI bot customers you can talk to. And I feel like we're on the cusp of this dystopian society where bots are interviewing bots and coming up with answers on which way companies should go. It's just crazy.
Yeah, anybody that has ever done a usability test knows that that will never work, because I think Neil deGrasse Tyson says it best. He says, the reason why physics is easy and sociology is hard is because the minute you introduce humans, things go nonlinear, right? How many times have you tried doing a test where the designer has built something and you ask the user to complete it and the button is right in front of them, right? And you watch them move around, whether you're doing eye tracking or just looking at their eyes or just watching the mouse, and you're like, how do they not see that, right? Humans never to surprise, to amaze me, and they're different models of the world and the way that they act, and AI is never going to get that. And if we synthesize data and we synthesize users, everything's going to become the same. So it's worthless. There's no competitive advantage there, right? Anyway, I'm clearly heated about that particular one. So I'm going to let that go and move on in the sense of time. But there's a lot that we can build on there. So I want to kind of move things in a positive direction here now and say, what does a mature implementation look like? And I'm going to actually take the lead on this one because I've just got some ideas and I don't know if they're any good. So I'm going to say them and then let the experts in the room bounce them back. Well, first, I think we need training courses so that people understand the limitations and the advantages of AI, from a mature data standpoint, not just a novelty standpoint. And then, you need prompt engineering, right? Just like when design teams build a design language and a design system, I think research teams need their own research system where it is an understanding of what type of language, what type of prompts do I use with the different tools to get different types of outputs. It takes a long time playing around to learn those things. And not many companies I know are offering them. And then I think the biggest part about it is teaching the leadership, the C-suite, and the companies that are hiring and buying these tools that it's a relationship, it's not a transaction. That's really important because AI is very valuable, but it is a new player in the relationship, and it's not something where you can just say, oh, I'm going to hire this thing, and I'm going to get rid of someone on the team that does something similar. I have a feeling there's going to be a pretty big backlash in the next 6 to 9 months of all the billions of dollars that have been invested in AI and realizing there's some pretty hard stops. And oh my God, we still need people. What a surprise. But anyway, that's just some of my thoughts, and they're very early thoughts. I think there's a lot for us to still figure out in this space. So let me pass that. Sydney, what are your thoughts on this one? What does a mature implementation look like?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you that really having that level of expertise, maybe having someone come in to explain not just to the team of researchers, but to their leadership, right? What tools are actually available? What are the best options out there? And the reality, right? I think that would make a huge impact on helping set up a company for success. I think the other piece is today, for example, my team, we're leveraging 5 different tools. Is there a future where we could use 1, right? Or 2 even would be better than 5, right? And that's just on, like, say, one survey, right? Going through 5 different tools to do the full analysis. So I think that's the other piece, is thinking through, how do we slim that down a little bit? But I think those pieces have to go hand in hand, right? Getting the right tool for the job, and then having more in-depth training on, what it could actually deliver, and then realistically where those limitations are. I think, and that would have to be updated regularly, right? Because the field has changed so much just, in the past 6 months, right? And it's going to continue to change. So I think those pieces would be really important as well.
All right, thanks, Sydney. Akos?
I'm going to build again on what Sydney shared, is to map out your research process. Understand in each step what are the tools that the team is using, what is their skill level, what are their backgrounds, are there PMs doing user interviews or running survey, are these seasoned researchers? And I think what is very important is that AI is it's the buzzword for investors. If you look at like the latest Y Combinator batches, I think they are overwhelmingly investing in AI. And I think it's very easy to get carried away on this wave and say, okay, let's just use AI for everything. So one of the points on mature implementation is to think about in your research process, where are those points where AI can have the biggest impact, either in productivity, checking for blind spots, and what's the effort to implement it. Because if you need 5 tools to implement it, and in each tool, you increase your productivity a lot, but then you have to move data manually from tool 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. Well, you haven't saved that much time. You created another problem for yourself. So I think thinking about where AI has like low effort to implement and at the same time high impact is a good and simple framework here. And what I would encourage everyone to do is this is what we do all the time at Airtime. It's to build proof of concepts. Like if you have an idea, this is what I want to use AI for. So let's say I'm going to have focus groups, and I would like to have a tool which can identify 10 speakers accurately. It's not a big thing to get a couple of technical people, spend 2 days, and build a very scrappy solution, which is not scalable. It cannot be given to the rest of the company, but test if current LLM models are capable at least of delivering something adequate. And this sort of experimenting with what AI can deliver is very important. It could be that you test it with multiple tools. It could be that you build on OpenAI or any of the other large LLM models out there, and just playing with it and seeing what results you can get for yourself. So do that. And my last point is. And this is very important. When you do that, also do a manual, like a manual analysis, and just to have this control group, like what's the confidence level that you can get, just to have a feeling how off AI is and how spot on, looking from the other angle.
Okay, so we have just under 10 minutes left. So what I'm going to do is I want to ask a question, and this is specifically to you, Dwayne, and to you, Akos. As founders of research software companies, what is the future of AI in research, and like what are the challenges that you're trying to work on now that's going to make it better for us? There you go.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're hitting on it right there. Like right now, you're seeing a lot of AI tools be built that do a thing, that does something. And so in order to do anything, you're kind of still stuck in the same path you were, except for now you have AI tools instead of moving from Excel to to Miro to PowerPoint. You're moving from one AI tool to another. And I think we're betting on, you're going to start to see more platform plays in AI where you can accomplish your workflow within there. I think also something that we're also betting on is AI is not going to replace product managers or researchers. It's really about the human in the middle and enabling them. I think there's more and more things that we can do to help the. So one of the things that we've done with, in talking to product managers and researchers about how they're spending their time, we're finding like there's a lot of time spent in recruiting, a lot of time spent in analysis, and then when you talk about what they want to be doing, they want to be talking to customers and socializing their work. When you talk to executives, like, what do you want your product managers and research to be doing? It's like, well, I want them talking to customers and I want them making decisions about our future. And so how do we start to take those high value things where the humans get to do more of the high value things and AI takes care of some of the plumbing for us. I think just as an AI tool builder right now, like one of the biggest challenges we're having is just keeping up every day, like new LLMs release, some new functionality, and so like trying to figure out like how to balance that. But that's really like where we're focused.
Okay. Thank you. Akos, you want to finish it up?
Yeah. I think this sort of, we touched on this, one of the key challenges that AI-led companies in the research field need to solve as the mistrust that is it's somehow inherent to our thinking that whenever we start using an AI tool, what does it miss? What biases does it have? And we keep always comparing it to human results. So one of the very important milestones will be to increase that confidence level that a tool can deliver to a degree where anyone's using it can be fairly comfortable that in that limited space of understanding text, it does really, really well, and you don't need to double check that. I think that's one of the very most important milestones. In terms of looking into the future, I hope, and I'm curious if this will materialize, that using the productivity gains, researchers get to do other types of research methods, going more out on the field, shadowing people, observing customers. I'm mostly exposed to tech companies, and then this tech bubble. A lot of time research is myopic in a sense that it's focused on virtual user interviews. And I love the story. My wife she's a marketing leader. She's not a researcher, but whenever she takes a new job, her first thing is that she sits like for the first few months, always a couple of days every week in a retail store, working from there, just listening to and watching what people do in those stores. What are the questions that they ask, and just picks them up. And she also asks her team to do that. So I hope that the productivity gains that we get will allow researchers to have time for more time-intense research methods like going out on the field.
All right, thank you. Thank you, everyone on the panel here. I'm really looking forward to that because, I come from a background in ethnography, and I have to say that the most powerful insights I've ever delivered as a researcher come from getting out in the field. Like just seeing how people live their lives, how they use products, all the things that we can't do in remote or lab environments. And yet it's very expensive and time consuming. And so that's why companies just can't invest in that, even though they know it's good for them. So, that's a bright picture. I appreciate you painting that, get me back into the field. We just barely grazed upon several of the really key issues, and there's probably a lot more. So what I'll do is I'll invite you to maybe come see me in the hallway, or any of us, or myself, Dwayne and I, since we're the ones that are here, in the hallway, and tell us, hey, what else is important to you? And we're gonna, be good researchers and take some notes, right? And then we're gonna organize a series of talks to help answer those questions and to dig in them further. But for Design Week, that is the end of this conversation. So thank you all very much for coming out and listening, and thank you for joining us remotely, Sydney and Akos.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.